So please consider it. Thank you, Wayne. So tonight's speaker is Hillary McDaniel, Community Events Manager for Utah Pride Center. You'll probably know the Utah Pride Center from the Utah Pride Parade, which I think had 170,000, roughly, we'll say 250,000 people showed up last year. But in doing my research on it, they do an awful lot of things. Conferences, they have speakers, they do major events like the Queer Prom, Masquerade Ball, the Utah Pride Festival that we all know. But they also supply an awful lot of training and support and community education for the LGBTQ plus members in Utah. And they are a 501c3 nonprofit, and they're making a huge impact in one of the most unlikely places to a lot of us to have that sort of undercurrent being served. I'm proud of what they do. My daughter is a big fan, but without further ado, Hillary, would you like to take the stage, please?
So yeah, I'm the community events manager. I use she and her pronouns, and throughout the presentation tonight I'll be talking about some things like pronouns, some words that you might not be familiar with, like cisgender, transgender, bisexual. If there's any a point in time when I say a word that maybe you don't know the meaning of that word, feel free to raise your hand, and I just like to use the word language check. Language check, can you help me with that? So if I say any words that maybe you're not familiar with, feel free to ask. That's one thing that we're really passionate about at the Pride Center is community education. So I titled my talk, Getting to Know Your Utah Pride Center, and if you're not a member of the LGBTQ plus community, you may not think that the Pride Center is for you. You may not understand what resources might be there for you or for family members or friends, and so I kind of want to just let people know what we have there. A little bit of history on me. I didn't come out as bisexual until I was almost 30 years old, and I didn't know about the Pride Center at all. I knew about the festival and the parade, of course, but I didn't know that those events were attached to an actual community center that had resources for me as someone who was coming out. And so that's a big effort that we're trying to do at the Pride Center is reach out to the community and let them know that we're here and what we're here for. I'll give you a little bit of history on the Pride Center. So we've gone through a lot of name changes. A lot of you may not know we've been around for quite a while. So 1975 is when the Pride Center started as the Gay Community Services Center Incorporated. Quite a name. A few years later, they changed the name to the Gay Community Service Center and Clinic. You can see that was in 1984, and we had a lot more needs for clinics in the 80s as the AIDS crisis and HIV crisis started to ramp up. Changed the name to the Utah Stonewall Center, and then the Gay and Lesbian Community Center of Utah, the Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Transgender Community Center of Utah. It really rolls off the tongue. But as you can see in our name changes, you'll see, we started out with a Gay Community Center. The Utah Stonewall Center. Is anyone familiar with Stonewall, the Stonewall riots? Yes, 1969. That was riots that happened in New York City when cops came into bars at the time. They would hassle people who were gay and arrest them, and people finally fought back on a very famous night in 1969. And then as you can see, we started to use the GLBT, using LGBT and actually including transgender in the name of the center. And then today, starting in 2006, changed the name to the Utah Pride Center. We've been the Utah Pride Center ever since. We moved our location, so let me go back to this slide. You might recognize this building. This is now Ruby Snack Cookies on 3rd West, and this is now the ACLU's building on 3rd West, a little bit further down. So we moved to a building on 4th South, right across from the library. And we were there for a few years, and in 2017 we purchased the building that we're in now, which is on Main Street, right by the ballpark. Our current executive director is Rob Molman. He's from South Africa and has just been the executive director for about a year and a half now. About 2,000 people access this center every single month. 673 clients come and use our mental health services. 25% of our clients identify as transgender or gender non-conforming, non-binary. 10% are under the age of 21. And we get clients from all over the place: Salt Lake City, Tooele, Davis, Weber counties, and some coming from Utah County as well. We have a lot of senior-focused events, between 2 and 4 events every single week, and about 100 people each week in those events. The mission of the Utah Pride Center is we want to unite, empower, celebrate Utah's diverse LGBTQ+ community by providing a safe and welcoming space for education, partnerships, services, and events which advance our collective health, wellness, and success. And that's kind of summarized in our vision statement that we want a thriving LGBTQ+ community in Utah. So a thriving community looks different to different people. A lot of times when I'm talking about the LGBTQ+ community, I'll use the word queer community, which used to be to some people a slur, and now it's being used in academia a little bit more. So some people like to reclaim that word queer, or just the gay community. But within our community, there's a lot of different communities that have different needs. A person who is cisgender, I'm a cisgender person, and what that means is I identify with the gender that I was assigned at birth. So when I was born, I was assigned a gender by a doctor, and I've always felt like that's my gender. So that's cisgender. Nobody told me I was cisgender until I was probably in my 30s. I didn't know that word. And I think it's important to think about that no one's ever told you what you are. But when you're transgender or gender non-binary, or when you're gay or bisexual, someone tells you who you are, they give you a label. So being cisgender is actually a privilege that we don't really think about much until maybe we meet someone from the transgender community or gender non-conforming community who has to fight every single day to not be misgendered or to be recognized as a person and not someone who's mentally ill, but as somebody who was born that way and that there's nothing different about them. The way that we help people at the Pride Center, I'm going to go through a lot of programs and services that we have. So we have mental health services, and I'll get into some of those in detail in a minute. We have education and training. We have community events, center programs, and we also have community programs. So I'm going to start with mental health and some of the resources that we have for mental health at the Pride Center. So we have therapists, so personal one-on-one therapy. We have group therapy, so a men's support group, women's support group, a parent therapy group, transgender adult support group, survivors of suicide attempts support group, and addiction recovery programs like AA. Our one-on-one counseling service, so a lot of times it's hard to find a therapist who understands what you're going through as someone who's in the LGBTQ+ community. So finding a therapist is often the first and hardest step. And so we, of course, have therapists at the Pride Center who are affirming of various gender identities and sexual identities. And we take insurance. We have a sliding scale with the cost of therapy. So if you can't afford therapy at all, we will cover you. If you can afford $20 for a session, we'll cover you. So we've made it so that cost isn't a barrier in getting mental health services. Some of the support groups, so the men's support group, they talk about all kinds of things, and it's open to adult cisgender men that identify as gay or bisexual. The women's support and social group, they also are open to any queer adult person identifying as female. The parent therapy group, I'm hoping they will change this name. We have internally, we started calling it the parent and caregiver group, because sometimes it might be a grandparent or someone in somebody's life who comes out as transgender or comes out as gay, and they're going to have as many questions or more than the person who's actually coming out. And they need a supportive place where they can ask those questions, and ask those questions to people instead of the person in their life who's coming out, who's answering those questions every single day. So the parent therapy group and caregiver group is one of my favorites. I see so many parents who just feel really lost when their child's coming out or being bullied at school, and they're finding a lot of support through staff members who work at the Pride Center, and also just other parents, just being able to talk about that kind of thing. And then the transgender adult support group is for people who identify as transgender, gender non-binary, or gender non-conforming, and they have a lot of various topics in there as well, and just really relying on each other for support. One of the newer programs of the Utah Pride Center is the Survivors of Suicide Attempts support group. It's actually the first group like this in the state of Utah, and the first attempt of survivor group in the nation targeted to LGBTQ+ people. It's been around for a few years now, And I've got some stats here on suicide. 56% of people who attempt had a crisis immediately preceding their death, 10% with an intimate partner, 31% with family. In 2017, we all know the suicide rates are really high, but it was the leading cause of death for ages 10 to 17 and 18 to 24. And LGBTQ plus youth are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than their straight peers. This group, I can speak to it a little bit personally, actually. I was a member of the very first survivors of suicide attempts support group at the Pride Center. Before I worked there, before I really volunteered there much, I heard about the program on KRCL on Radioactive, and I was looking for support. I was going to one-on-one therapy to kind of help me through some of my issues when I started to come out. But being in a group with 10 other people who had also attempted suicide and survived, and who struggle with suicide ideation every day was something personally for me that just changed my life and saved my life. So I like to talk about that as much as I'm able to. It's still something that's kind of hard and personal to talk about, but the more people in my life who've talked about it with me, it's helped me. So yes, we have a question.
Is that also for families of survivors?
This is just for survivors, but we are working on a program currently to start a program where we could have family members. We have a grief support group called Good Grief, and that would be for people who have lost loved ones. But yeah, we're talking about doing one for family members as well. So great question. The next chain of programs is education and training. We do LGBTQ plus cultural sensitivity training. We do that for businesses. We do that for schools. We do that for groups like your group. If you're trying to create a safe space for people to come into your group who may be members of the LGBTQ plus community, and you need some cultural sensitivity training, words to use, words not to use, we do one-on-one type trainings for that. We also have several conferences. The high school GSA, which is Gender Sexuality Alliance, used to be like Gay Straight Alliance. That's what a GSA is. It's a GSA and educator conference. We just had our 11th annual Gender Evolution Conference, which is a conference all about gender. The Queer Continuum Conference, which is about various different sexualities, and the LGBTQ plus Speakers Bureau. A little bit more about education and training. I've already said a lot about it, but we're flexible with our training. We can do a training that would last an hour, a training that lasts the full day. It really is just kind of tailored to what you need, and we also do sliding scale fees with our training and education. That's one of our big initiatives at the Pride Center, is to educate our own community and allies to our community. This is a little bit more about some of the conferences. Gender Evolution is the only, Utah's only gender conference. So we did 25 different workshops all around gender, from things about changing your name legally, to surgeries, to a panel of teenagers who are transgender talking about their experience at schools. And it was attended by over 450 people. Just this last week, and it's growing every single year. So we're finding a lot more interest in people who are wanting education and support. The Queer Continuum Conference is coordinated by the 1 to 5 Club at the Utah Pride Center. And the 1 to 5 Club, they get their name from something called the Kinsey Scale, which is a sexuality scale from 0 to 7, 0 being 100% heterosexual, never attracted to anyone of the same sex, and 7 being absolutely homosexual. And so between 1, so that's 0 and 7, between 1 and 5, there's a whole bunch of different ranges of sexualities: bisexual, pansexual, asexual. And so that club meets together as a group to talk about those different things, and they have a conference every single year. And then again, the Gender and Sexuality Alliance, or GSA, an educator conference. It's great for people who have children in schools who might be interested in starting an alliance, educators at schools to kind of get education on how to be a safe and affirming place for students from the LGBTQ community. The community events that we have, of course, mentioned the Pride Festival and Parade. We now call that Pride Days because it usually extends to about a 2-week period, and really the whole month of June. So Pride Days is our biggest event of the year. We have different center events, community events. We have a youth dance series and a lot of senior events as well. So Pride Days, we have about 100,000 people that participate in Pride Days events throughout the 2 weeks. A lot of people, of course, know about the festival and the parade. We also have Outdoors and Proud 5K event. We host a gala called the Pride Spectacular. We have a Pride Interfaith service. And we always do a Pride protest, march, and rally because our movement did start as a protest and a rally. And it's turned into a parade, which is really fun, but there's still an element of protest and fighting for equality for all of the members of our communities. The Youth Dance Series is really amazing. That's a really good volunteer opportunity if you're looking for volunteer opportunities. Chaperoning those dances that they have is really fun. There's a queer prom that they have every year, which is about 1,200 kids come to that. It's huge. Some of our other dances, Youth Pride, the Friday night before the Pride Festival, Masquerade, Homecoming, and Cupid's Ball. And a few hundred kids attend all of those different dances throughout the year. It's really neat to just see those kids be themselves and let loose and have a space where if they don't feel like they can go to their own prom without getting bullied or harassed, we have a safe space for them. We have a big Halloween party every year, usually the Saturday before Halloween. The Transgender Pool Party is another really great event that we host for transgender people and gender non-conforming people to feel comfortable going and being at a pool together without being gawked at and without feeling out of place but feeling supported in their community. Some of our senior events, we've got game nights, sing-alongs, Thanksgiving dinners, potlucks, lunch clubs, so many things going on in senior programming, which just warms my heart because that's another big population that we have to worry about suicide and about just loneliness, and bringing these people together for game nights, things like that has been a lot of fun, and we just continue to grow that group. We also host a big family picnic every year. The Pride Festival actually started here in Salt Lake City in 1974, so before we even had our first center, there was a gathering at a park in Salt Lake City, and that was the first festival. So every single year we still have a big picnic that's free, open to the public, to kind of commemorate and remember that first event that kicked everything off. Some of our center programs, senior programs and advocacy, and our youth and family programs. We have programs at the Pride Center from cradle to grave, pretty much 2 years old until you're 102. So we've got our youth and family programs separated out into different age groups and also our parents program. The Pride Center is a unique and critical resource for youth ages 2 to 20, their parents and caregivers. In a state where programming and support is scarce and hard to find, where folks are coming out younger and younger and gender diverse populations are growing rapidly, the Pride Center provides a space for youth and families to connect, grow, and thrive. There's a program that's really amazing called Unique Expressions. It's a 10-week program for youth ages 10 to 14. They meet every week on Mondays. It provides youth with the opportunity to express their identities, exploring instruments, doing art and self-portraits, writing songs. It focuses on building community and strengthening self-image. Building Families is another really great group. It's a peer-led prenatal and postpartum support group that meets weekly on Mondays, open to LGBTQ plus parents who are pregnant, non-gestational parents, and parents of children 0 to 2. And they just want to provide a space for parents to find resources and build their support network with other families. There's a lot of kids who have never met another kid who has 2 moms or 2 dads. And for them to just meet that one person who feels the same way when they might be sitting in a classroom and everyone's talking about their mom and their dad, and they feel nervous about how to tell people that they have 2 moms or 2 dads, and find the words and find the strength within each other. Our youth support group is also peer-led. It meets weekly on Tuesdays. There are 2 sessions of that, one for 14 to 20 and one for 10 to 14. And then our parent and caregiver support group actually happens at the same time as the youth support group. So the youth are downstairs having their fun and doing their activities, and the parents are upstairs in a room together talking and sharing their stories with each other. A few statistics, 59.5% of LGBTQ plus students feel unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation. 44.6% of students felt unsafe at school because of their gender expression. 34.8% of LGBTQ plus students missed at least one entire day of school in the past month because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable. 95.3% of LGBTQ students hear homophobic remarks at their school, for example, the word dyke or faggot. 60.4% of students who did report said that their school staff did nothing in response or told the student to ignore it. Yes?
I have a two-part question. One
Yes.
is how long have those numbers been tracked? What is the scope of time? The second one, is there any sort of decrease going on that you're seeing over time as a result of some of these programs?
Yeah, so these, oh, he was wondering how long this has been tracked, how long some of these questions have been being asked. So this study actually comes from GLSEN, and they've been doing work on this for the last 20 years, I believe. And we, when we do our programming at the Pride Center, we usually ask people these questions as they're coming in, ask questions when they're leaving, surveys throughout to kind of track our progress. And I don't know, I can't really tell you if things are getting better. Sometimes I do feel like they're getting better as an adult, and I surround myself with a lot of affirming people, and I don't allow people in my life who aren't affirming. But for children, they are, stuck in these classrooms and these environments where they don't get a choice to leave. They can't just get up and walk away. So we're finding ways to track that. I think even asking these questions is pretty new in society. I think in the past it's been very shameful to even talk about your sexuality or even know what's going on because the words aren't there and you've never met anybody like that before in your life. Another fun thing with the youth, they have a youth planning committee, so all of their dances and all of their big events are completely planned by youth. There's a coordinator in the room kind of, being the referee and making sure that milestones are met, but they get to choose everything from the theme to the artwork, and they run their own events completely, which is great. There's a FAM Educator Social, and that's a group for educators. It meets monthly. It's in collaboration with friends, allies, and mentors of the LGBTQ plus community, or FAM as we call it. The Educator Social is a gathering for teachers, administrators, and other school professionals to seek support, share resources, and build community around supporting LGBTQ plus students. And that's really well attended. When they come in monthly, we have a full room of educators who are interested in doing better and showing up for their students. Youth activity nights, it's just kind of a night for games and crafts and hanging out. And Families Like Ours is another group that we have. It's a play group. They meet weekly on Saturday for youth ages 2 to 10 and their families. So whether you have two moms, a single gay dad, a transgender kid, or a queer older sibling, your family's welcome to Families Like Ours. Another one of my favorite programs. I try to go into the Pride Center a lot on Saturdays just to be in that room and hang out with people who are just seeking community. It's a beautiful thing. Some of our senior program and advocacy work that we do, a few stats, 2.4 million LGBTQ plus adults over the age of 50 in the United States, with the expectation that this will double to over 5 million by 2030. So we already have 2.5 million LGBTQ plus seniors, and I think it's one of those populations that a lot of times isn't talked about a lot. It isn't on the forefront when you think of the LGBTQ plus community. I don't think people automatically think about seniors and where they fall in this community and what their needs are. And again, that's why I try to use the term LGBTQ communities with an S, because the needs of older adults is a lot different than children, a lot different across the board. LGBTQ seniors are 2 times more likely to be aging alone and 4 times more likely to have never had children to help them as they age. There's financial instability, there's legal issues. 50% of seniors report having experienced discrimination when looking for housing. And then LGBTQ plus elders have a higher rate of suicide than any other demographic. I know the narrative in the state when we talk about suicide prevention oftentimes is basically focused on youth for the most part, and it is a very harrowing statistic that we see how many youth are taking their own lives. But again, I think that seniors oftentimes are not highlighted in that conversation, and their needs aren't being met. And so we're throwing a lot of time and energy and resources into our senior program and advocacy at the state and city level, just going and telling the stories of the seniors who do come to the Pride Center and who need help. But here's some of the programs just for seniors alone. Tuesday Trotters, it's a walking group, welcomes participant of any age and ability level. The Sage Supper Club, it's 50 plus individuals that meet at a local restaurant, enjoy a meal and conversation. Lunch and Learn, monthly lecture and community organizations providing educational information on a variety of topics. Maybe we'll have the Humanists come sometime and talk about your community. The Sage Book Club in partnership with KUED Book in a Box program. Stitch and Bitch Knitting Club, varied age and gender people partner with Clever Octopus to work on handcraft projects. So much fun. I love Stitch and Bitch. I should go more often. Easy Does It Yoga teaches people how to modify a yoga practice to fit their ability level. Square Dancing, it's a weekly LGBTQ plus square dancing club for anyone over 18. Game night, different games each month for anyone over 18. The 10th East support group, men's sack lunch, the Good Grief group, which I mentioned already, grief group for anyone experiencing loss. The Bi Hive group, which is a group for any person over 40 who identifies as bi or pansexual. Caregiver support group, Phone a Friend club, and Pet Loss grief support group. And that's not even all the programs. That's just all I could fit on one slide that we wanted to highlight. But the youth or the senior programming is, again, like I said, growing and even expanding out into other areas with some satellite programs happening throughout the state. On our community programs list, we've got our Bi Plus programs, as in bisexual. Bi Plus meaning bisexual, also pansexual. If we need a language check on pansexual, bisexual, bi meaning two, you're interested in two genders, your own and another. Pansexual means many, so you're interested in people who maybe don't identify as male or female, which we call non-binary. Some people use the word bisexual, pansexual interchangeably. It could take a whole year to talk about that, but Bi Plus is what we summarize those programs as. We also have a People of Colors and Allies group, Transaction group, Public Safety Pride Alliance, the Utah Queer Historical Society, and our volunteer program. So I'll go through some of these community programs. The Utah Queer Historical Society, they compile, organize, and safeguard intended to make more viable the history of our communities. It also provides historical perspective for the Utah Pride Center. If you come and visit the Pride Center, we have a wall called, and it says Utah's Queer Ancestors, and it's all pictures in black and white and sepia tone of pioneers, really, that you've never heard their stories before. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Ogden's Own, and they make vodka, they make gin. They make this gin called Madame Petrini gin, and on the bottle of that gin is Brigham Young's cross-dressing son, and who used to go by Madame Petrini, and that's what the gin is named after. And on our queer historical wall, there's a picture of Madame Petrini and his story. And there's so many stories like that really, until I started working at the Pride Center and being more involved in this community, I started to hear some of these stories that have just been completely lost over time. The Queer Historical Society will put together every single month a queer oratory, so they invite someone from our community or someone who has been impactful in the Utah community to come and share a story for an hour, and it's really, really great and interesting topics. The 1 to 5 Club, like I mentioned, is designed to reach out to the sexually fluid communities of Utah, including those who identify as bisexual, pansexual, asexual, and beyond. The mission is to strive to create safe spaces at the intersection of our sexual, gender, ability, and racial identities. Transaction is a group to help transgender people connect and improve, and also gender nonconforming people. They offer mentorship in that program. They teach life skills and just help with all kinds of issues that the transgender community faces, whether it's discrimination in housing, finding employment, and just supporting each other in all the ways that they know how. The Public Safety Pride Alliance is a partnership between our community and the police, fire, and emergency medical services. We work together to educate our community about public safety access, educate public safety organizations about how to serve the LGBTQ plus community. And our community has an interesting and long history with police officers. I've mentioned Stonewall and the police brutality that happened that night, and the police going into bars and rounding people up and taking them to jail, following the law and enforcing the law. But we have a history where a lot of people in our community don't really trust police. So when they are victims of crimes, they often don't report. Sometimes reporting a crime can often out yourself as queer when you don't want to be outed. And so we're working closely with some members of law enforcement who are also members of the LGBTQ plus community to create safe places for people to go and report crimes and talk about things that are going on in their neighborhood, and where maybe they don't feel safe talking to a regular police officer who doesn't understand the queer community or is not a part of it. The People of Color and Allies group is actually our newest program. It's for people of color and allies, guided discussions that identify and examine issues relevant to the community, focusing on intersections between racism and the community and its effect on the individual and society as a whole. And they meet once a month at the Pride Center. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities as well. Ongoing opportunities for volunteering at the Pride Center include front desk support, community outreach, media and marketing, events. We have regularly supporting multiple single day events. We always need help with the Pride Festival, obviously, but those dances that I talked about, and we do so many events, so always need help there. And then development and community engagement team. We also have opportunities to support one-time or annual events, so the Youth and Family Program dances, National Coming Out Day, the Utah Pride Festival, Pride Center Community Thanksgiving, the Big Gay Car Wash, Gender Evolution, and we have an entire community events calendar on our website that's just chock full of events throughout the whole week. So if you check out utahpridecenter.org, you can find our community calendar and find something that might interest you as some place maybe where you want to learn or get to know members of the community, or something that just fits your schedule. We also have some skills-based volunteer positions. We have a webmaster, but we're always needing help with web, graphic design, always looking for photographers, videographers for events, office management, administrative tasks, filing, things like that. So, and then the community counseling service, we have a lot of internships available. But you have to have a current BSW or MSW, but you have to be a student to be considered for one of those. And then we also have volunteer opportunities with our programs. So the 1 to 5 Club, SAGE, which is the 50 plus, the seniors programming, Public Safety Pride Alliance, Utah Queer Historical Society, Queer People of Color, and Allies and Transactions. So any of those programs that might interest you and you're interested in volunteering or maybe just attending to learn more, you can visit our community calendar, and for any of these volunteer opportunities that might look interesting to you, you can email volunteers@utahpridecenter.org. I'm going to try and see if I can get this little virtual tour to work. We recently had a company come in and photograph our building in such a way that people don't actually have to come into the Pride Center to see it anymore. Yes?
Yeah, before you go on,
Yes.
I have a language question.
Yeah, yes.
And what is Q?
Oh, the Q. Q stands for queer.
Stands for what?
Queer.
Why is that different than the rest of the letters?
Well, the L is lesbian,
Yes,
G is gay,
yes,
B bisexual,
yes.
T transgender, and then Q encompasses kind of what I was talking about with those 1 to 5 sexualities. They're not really encompassed in bisexual, and queer could also encompass gender. identities that are different from cisgender. So queer is kind of one of those all-encompassing words. So when you say LGBTQ, the Q was kind of supposed to catch everyone else that was left out LGBT. So now it's Q plus because some people feel left out, not even within the word queer. They don't feel like.
Plus,
The plus is everybody else who feels like they're a member of our community. So
different than the
there-
Q.
yeah, so yeah, it's really interesting how our alphabet has changed and expanded over the years. I've also seen it written out as LGBTQI, which stands for intersex, A,
What
intersex. Would you like a language check on intersex?
what is that?
I am
What does that
happy
mean?
to tell you about intersex. I actually just helped run the Gender Evolution Conference, and we brought 2 keynote speakers who are intersex. And intersex, they used to use the word hermaphrodite, which is a word that is not used anymore, and it's actually a word that scientifically isn't even possible. It meant you were male and female. Intersex people basically are born with traits that are considered male, that are considered female, and they're not one or the other. And typically with intersex people, the doctors and the parents will make a decision when that baby is born of whether they're male or female, do surgeries without consent, consent of the parents, but not consent of the child, obviously. And later in life, they begin to experience what we call gender dysphoria, where they've been raised as a female and they really feel like they are male, and there's a lot of confusion there. So intersex people actually make up about 2% of the population, and it's another one of the members of our communities that are often not talked about. And so for a while, people were writing it out LGBTQIA and then a plus. There's also LGBTQIA2S, and 2S, I know, 2S stands for Two-Spirit, and Two-Spirit, indigenous people before colonization, there were a lot of Two-Spirit people, and there still are Two-Spirit people today, and that is, someone, again, today we would call it transgender. That would be probably the most similar thing, would be transgender or gender non-conforming, non-binary, maybe feeling gender fluid, more masculine one day, more feminine, both masculine, feminine all the time. But Two-Spirit people are another group that has been kind of erased throughout this movement. And so the Q plus at the end is kind of acknowledging that there are more than just LGBTQ people in our community, in our movement. And if you're having a hard time keeping track, trust me, you're not alone. It's a lot. And like I was showing you at the very beginning with the different name changes of the Pride Center over time, a lot of those name changes have had to do with communities having to fight for a place at the table, specifically the transgender community. I mean, Stonewall, a lot of the participants in the Stonewall riot were transgender women of color, and transgender women of color in this day and age have it the worst. They're being murdered at a much higher rate than any other members of the LGBT community. They are oftentimes discriminated in employment and housing. And in the fight for gay liberation through the last 50 years, transgender people, I feel like, are just now starting to get a seat at the table in the last 5 to 10 years. And so that's a big reason why we try to include everybody when we talk about the gay community and using all of those letters. Yes, question?
I've been saving up a question on this. It came up there. In the 80s, I worked at Primary Children's Hospital, and we maybe once a month got a baby in and would receive a specimen that didn't have a name. It had an identifier, but not a name. And the diagnosis was usually ambiguous genitalia.
Yeah.
And they'd send it off for genetic studies, and then presumably come back and do surgery. You just talked about, I mean, you mentioned that in passing. Does that still happen? That was my question.
Yeah, it is still happening today, and there are several groups, nonprofits and grassroots organizations that are working really hard to end intersex surgeries and allow those people to grow up and consent to surgery later in life if they want to. There is no current standard medical protocol across the board for intersex people and what to do with an intersex baby. The term used, ambiguous genitalia, is typically what is written in medical records, and it usually comes down to the parents and the doctor making a decision. But there are activists working, and 2 of those activists were just here in Utah this last weekend at Gender Evolution, talking about the work they're doing to end those surgeries and not allow those surgeries to happen, because it has a lot to do with being forced into this binary where we live in a world where it's pink and blue, right? And it's male or female, but the actual real world isn't just pink and blue. It's not just male and female. When we see that, again, like I said, intersex people make up about 2% of the population, so it's a bigger population than you really may realize, and that's talked about. So to answer your question, yes, those surgeries still happen, and yes, people are working on and getting together finally, and I think the internet is a really big reason why these people are able to meet and talk. One of the things that was said a lot at the conference by several intersex speakers was, I never knew there was somebody who was like me. I didn't know there was another person at all like this anywhere. And I think people getting together and organizing and talking about their experiences is making a huge difference.
And are you familiar with the work of Joseph Campbell? What do you call it, myth? There was a Power of Myth was a series on Channel 7 where they interviewed. He studied his whole life on different myths that different civilizations have had. And he noted that the first gods that humans had were either female or hermaphroditic. And in Genesis 1 he says he created male and female in his own image. In his own image created he them. And so many of the gods, the most ancient gods, were hermaphrodites.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's familiar to me, the Power of Myth, and it makes me want to go and revisit that because that sounds fascinating.
It's a 7 or 8 episode thing on PBS where Campbell's interviewed by Bill Moyer.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it's a wonderful series.
Yeah.
It is on Netflix right now.
Oh, okay, well, I'm going to look it up. Thank you. Do you have a question, too?
Yeah. With who do the activists work?
With
legislature or with the hospitals?
Yeah, they're actually working a lot of different angles with legislation, obviously, to make so this isn't possible. It's illegal to do these operations.
Church? Are they working with the church?
Yeah, with churches, also with the medical, like with medical doctors, because that's one of the biggest problems is there's not anything that's standard across the board for intersex people. So it really depends on the zip code you're born into, the doctor that happens to be there that day, and the advice they give to your parents at the time. And so that's one of the groups that's working on this is called Interact, and it's a lot of youth activists who are intersex, and the parents of intersex people as well who want solutions and don't want this to happen anymore. So yeah, I'll take you on a little tour of the Pride Center really quickly. Okay. This is our building from the very top. It doesn't look very good, but let's go to the second floor.
It's all new.
It is pretty brand new. It actually used to be a credit union, and then it was the Mexican consulate. But this is right as you come in our front door. I'm going to kind of turn the camera here. So this is our front desk area. As you can see, really big open area. We've got booths, we've got coffee every day, we've got a kitchen back to the left. Over here, straight ahead, this is our cyber center. People come in and do homework, use the computers in here. This is one of our bigger meeting rooms where I was talking about that wall with Utah's queer Utah ancestors. There's Brigham Young's son right there, Madame Petrini. And you can see there's a lot of, old, just pioneer-looking photos that you would never guess and never really know the story without the work of the Utah Queer Historical Society. In these cases are a lot of our artifacts from the 70s and the 60s, and just the, I like this sign. It says, do you think homosexuals are revolting? You bet your sweet ass we are. I think that's great. But a lot of history in the movement, and specifically in Utah. Not much to see through here. There's a random person. I'm not kidding about that it used to be a bank. There's a safe in here. There's our safe. That's our safe space. And then we've got our kitchen here. Like I said, we host a lot of events. We host a lot of people who just come and hang out and have conversations. Our youth space is actually downstairs. Turn this way. I love their entryway. We need a cooler entryway to the upstairs admin area. It's not as fun as this. But the youth space, again, right as you enter, tons of resources in the community for support. Several offices down here and little small meeting spaces. One of my favorite spaces in the youth space is this big, large gathering room. We've got all of these clothing over here, so people who are kind of experimenting with gender and feeling it out. People who can't actually dress the way that they'd like to at home. When they show up to the Pride Center after school, they can change their clothes and look how they want to look. But yeah, lots of games and computers and lots of just spaces to chill out and hang out with friends downstairs. I'll work my way through. And then on the top floor, that's where I work, and it's mostly just administrative people. One of my biggest projects that I'm in charge of at the Pride Center is the Pride Festival. I'm the director of the festival. So as the community events manager, about 75% of my job goes to festival and parade and Pride Days. But I'll show you the hallway going up. We have photos in this hallway of all of our award winners for what we call the Kristen Reese Award, Dr. Kristen Reese. Is anyone familiar with Dr. Reese? Yeah? She was one of the first doctors in Utah that was willing and able to see HIV patients. And so we have an award named after her. And you can see in this hallway all the photos of people who have won that award over the years. Another big open space up here. And like I said, a lot of rooms for just meetings. We have support groups every single night. We have meeting groups for mental health, for different identities within the community. A lot of art. Down over here, if I can navigate over here, we've got through this door down here, this is all of our mental health spaces, so therapy offices, group therapy, yeah, and the like through there. And then this is just the hallway of admin people, my office, another office, our executive director's office. So this is where all the paperwork gets done upstairs at the Pride Center. And another couple of meeting rooms and a kitchen. So that's just a little virtual tour to kind of show you like how much space we have. Like I was saying at the beginning, we serve about 2,000 people every single month that come through the Pride Center for all different kinds of things. And so, you know, this building I feel like is not even quite maxed out to its potential. We could do a lot more at the center. Currently we have quite a long wait list for our mental health services. If you call right now, I think the wait is somewhere like 3 months. And that's something that we want to change. That's a big thing that I'm passionate about as someone who has gone to therapy at the Pride Center and been in groups at the Pride Center, that we really want to get that wait time down to 1 to 2 weeks. And that just has to do with, hiring more therapists, having more interns come through and work there for 6 months to a year at a time. And yeah, there's so much potential in this building. Not only do we host groups that are part of the LGBTQ communities, but also groups like NAMI for mental health support. I was just talking about, the Humanists are looking for a new place to meet. This could potentially be a place for you all to meet. So if you're looking for a meeting room for anything that would align with the mission of the Pride Center, we would be really happy to talk about hosting you there. And I think I'm ready for questions in general, so yes.
Well then, here's one.
All right.
Your mental health professionals, are they paid or volunteer or both?
They are paid.
Can you repeat
Yeah. The question was whether our mental health, are they paid employees or volunteers? So we have 2 full-time therapists, and then we have a lot of interns. We'd like to get that up to 4 full-time therapists and also interns as well. But yeah, they have to be an intern working towards an LSW or someone who is licensed.
Right. Another
Yes.
question.
Yes.
What's your source of funding?
Our source of funding, that was a question. We have a lot of different sources of funding. Our Pride Festival every year brings in a lot of money to fund the center. So we have sponsorships for different local businesses and nonprofits. You have to pay to be in our parade and have a booth at the festival. And then, of course, attending the festival, drinking beer, all puts money into the Pride Center. So that's a good way you can help. We do get some grants, some grant money. We're working on trying to get involved a little bit more with advocacy at the state level and getting some money, because I know there is money for suicide prevention programs and things like that. So that's something that we actually just hired another fundraising person to help with those efforts. Yes.
Are there legal issues ever come up with minors being in the area, in your place without parental consent, or just the opposite of that, with parents not wanting them there?
Yeah, so...
Do they have to get like a consent form?
Yeah, so the question was about minors coming into the space and if there are legal issues. So anyone who's part of our youth and family programs, there's an intake, and you actually sign up for those programs. We do have kids who come and want to be a part of those programs, and their parents are not consenting to that. And I know that there was a law just passed this last legislative session on teenagers who are kicked out of their house to be able to consent for their own services and sign for themselves. And so we're looking at that to see how much we could use that to help people who don't have parents who are supportive. But yeah, as far as legally, to be a part of our programs officially, you have to be, do an intake form. As far as just hanging out at the Pride Center, coming in and sitting and having coffee, it's open to the general public. If we've had youth who've been there, we just ask them what's going on, and we want to be that resource that if we can't help them, that we can find them services and people who can help them if we don't have what they need there. Yes, question?
Yeah, so as you go through your day-to-day activities, and the people can volunteer time, they can volunteer money, items. What is it that you find you want the most? What's lacking? What do you need?
Okay, the question was, what is the Pride Center lacking in terms of what we need as far as time, money? And I would say, we have a pretty good volunteer network of people, but we're always looking for more people to volunteer. We have a good base, but there's so much that we could be doing, and we could be doing better. I think if we had more help from the community. Other than that, of course we need more money. I just talked about, needing. I think it would be great if we could have 2 more full-time therapists, and that would help meet the needs of the community. So we're starting up a membership program where people can be members of the Pride Center and do a monthly contribution of $5 or $10 a month, and that'll be ramping up in the next couple months. We're hoping to engage the community there, because I know for me personally that's very easy to give $5 a month to a cause. It's a cup of coffee that I don't go and get, which is good. But yeah, so I would say funding and volunteers both are 2 things that we could use. Yes.
Do y'all coordinate with the Homeless Youth Center?
Yes, the question was, do we coordinate with the Homeless Youth Center? And yes, we do. VOA, Homeless Youth Center, is one of our resources. So if we do have somebody experiencing homelessness that's a youth that comes in, that's the first place that we try to get them into, because that is a safe place for LGBTQ youth. Yes.
This is a comment more than a question. We've seen a lot of LGBT people featured on television in sitcoms and regular shows, and that's encouraging. But just recently, there is 2 young men sitting on a couch, one with his arm around the other when he goes to take a drink of water, and his partner kind of pushes up and they laugh. It's an intimate moment, but it's a commercial, and it's a commercial sponsored by Big Farm. It's one of these drugs that's, go ask your doctor if you can have this drug. And I thought that was a really big step.
Yeah.
To use that in a commercial.
I would agree that representation in the media for LGBTQ plus people has been definitely one of the things that has helped our movement for equality gain acceptance. 20 years ago, it would have been really hard for us to get companies like Subaru to sponsor the festival, and now people are knocking on our door to sponsor us. And so it's good and bad. Sometimes you think, well, now people care because we're marketable, and like putting a gay person on your commercial isn't going to, some people are still going to boycott you, but you can actually your business can do better by aligning with us. So I think representation has been amazing, especially, you mentioned, that commercial, but in the transgender community, seeing Laverne Cox on Orange is the New Black and having a transgender woman of color and that character who you fall in love with and you get to know and you get to see, like, I don't want her to have to go to the men's prison because her identification says male. She is a woman. Everything about her is female. She wants to be with the women. And so things like that, I think highlight those issues in ways that, unless you had a friend who had gone through it or you personally knew somebody, those stories have been, really hidden and erased in our history. And so as we see more of it now in the media, I do think that has been helping to, I guess, quote unquote, normalize, who we are. Instead of it being, I grew up very religious. I grew up in the Mormon faith, and being gay was the worst thing that you could be, next to being a murderer. And that's how I grew up, hearing that every week at church. And so, of course, I wasn't gay. Anytime I got called a lesbian or I got made fun of for being a tomboy, I put up that wall even higher, that there's no way I could be that, because that to my parents would have been the worst thing that I could have been. And it took me a long time to break through that denial, and it took me leaving religion to kind of open my mind up to other possibilities and getting to know myself better. So yeah, I think that having the conversations around being queer and that being okay and acceptable and not a choice, and kind of getting rid of the rhetoric of you can become gay or I'm going to turn you gay, that kind of thing. Those kind of things, there's are actually members of this community because they don't feel like they can tell anyone what they're really feeling, or they're going to be rejected, and they often are. So, yeah. Any more questions? I know we're getting right up to 8:30. So, any other?
Oh, I just have one.
Yes.
So where you are now is on like by 13 South.
Yeah, it's 1380 South Main Street.
Okay. Do you have satellite programs? I mean, that's pretty far north. And do you have satellite programs that go down like into, the southern communities in the valley?
We don't have anything that's Utah Pride Center specific, but that's one of the biggest requests that we get when we have members of the community give us feedback on how the Pride Center could do better. We're not called the Salt Lake City Pride Center, but most of our programming does happen in Salt Lake City. And there is a really big need in rural communities. So what we do is we partner with other Pride festivals. Like there's a Southern Utah Pride Festival, there's a Moab Pride. So they don't actually have centers yet. They're kind of how we were in our early stages of not having a community center that was stable. But there are a lot of those organizations that are working in their festivals every single year to raise money to eventually have a center. So we do have safe partnerships, and people, like if someone were to call the Pride Center and they live in Ogden, they just got kicked out of their house because they came out to their parents, we have somebody in Ogden who we can call who can help us. But it's not a Utah Pride Center official place. But that's something that we're working on, and another thing why we want to increase our funding and expand and have more satellite offices, even if it's just a small one-room office, in a rural community. That can make a huge difference. So, something we're working on. Anything else? All right.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic job. Can you hear me? All right. Great job. Thank you for coming. If you're like me, I had no idea the breadth of what was offered through this organization. So some of the names of the groups were both descriptive and colorful.
That's
They're memorable.
Yes,
Yes, absolutely. We have some new faces here tonight. I won't call them out, make them stand up or embarrass themselves. But please take some time to shake their hands, say hello. They come from different organizations. I know of at least one gal. But we want to welcome them here tonight. And for all of you, there is food.